How has your day been? Thank you so much for joining our lives. I want to say thank you for your support so far. And this series has been great. We've been talking about the Before It Is Too Late series, and we've done 6 episodes already. So this is episode number 7. So thank you so much. The title of episode number 7 is The Person I Was Becoming. The person I was becoming. If you hear that that's in the past. Something happened. So let's dig into this. Let me begin tonight with something that may make some people feel really uncomfortable. But they rarely say it loud. They don't say it. So they feel uncomfortable, but they don't say it. This is a kind of fear that doesn't come from what happened to you. It comes from what you are noticing in yourself. It is a fear that whispers, I don't like the person I am slowly becoming. The fear that whispers, I don't like this drift. I don't like this position I am taking. Now, it is not because you're evil. It's not because you're broken beyond repair. No. And it's also not because your life is over. But because something inside you knows. You know that you're more irritated than you used to be. You know now that you're more numb than you used to be. You know that you're now more distant than you used to be. You know that you're more easily discouraged than you used to be. You're now less patient, less hopeful, less soft, less curious, less present. And what make this very hard is that nobody announces identity drift. And a lot of people don't even know that they are drifting. Nobody sends you a warning that, oh, you're changing. Nobody sends you a warning that you're drifting. You just wake up one day and you notice, I don't laugh the same anymore. You notice, I don't dream the same anymore. You notice, I don't trust the same anymore. You don't love the same anymore, even. You don't even talk to yourself the same. And then a very hard question appears. How did I become this person? How did I get here, Matt? How did I get here? For heaven's sake, how did I become this person? That is what this talk is about. The person I was becoming. Not the person I planned to be. Not the person I told myself or I told people I would be. Not the person I imagined I would be in my 20s. Not the person I thought pressure would make me stronger into. The person life was quietly shaping while I was busy surviving life. And I need to say this right at this beginning. This message here is not to shame you, because we don't do that on this channel. It is majorly for information, awareness, honesty. This message is not to shame you at all. It is here to wake you up before you settle into a version of yourself that was built by drift instead of design. All right. Most people imagine change as dramatic. They think change is a big mistake. They think change is a crisis. They think change is a collapse. They think change is a public failure. But that's not usually how identity changes. Identity usually changes quietly. It changes through repetition. It changes through emotional weather. It changes through the routines you stop questioning. It changes through what you normalize. It changes through what you tolerate. Identity changes through what you stop believing is possible. You become what you repeatedly do. You become what you repeatedly accept. You become what you repeatedly rehearse in your mind. You become what you repeatedly return to when life gets difficult. If every hard season makes you withdraw, eventually you become harder to reach. Eventually you build a wall around you. If every disappointment makes you smaller, eventually smallness starts to feel like wisdom. You normalize smallness. If every dream gets postponed, eventually postponement becomes your identity. If every wound gets unexamined, eventually the wound starts making decisions for you. That is why this talk matters. Because some of you are not just dealing with habits, you're dealing with a version of yourself that has been under construction for years. And today, we're not just talking about behavior, we're talking about becoming. Becoming is more than behavior. Let me make this a little bit human. There was a man who did not see himself as an angry person. He saw himself as being responsible. He was serious, in his mind, dependable, strong. But the years were heavy. The years were full of responsibilities, pressure at work, bills to pay, expectations to meet, fatigue from doing so many things, private disappointment he never really processed, a life where he felt needed all the time and understood very little. And slowly, this man changed. He became shorter with people. He became more impatient. He became more sarcastic. He became more emotionally unavailable, easier to frustrate, harder to talk to. He did not wake up one day and say, I want to become a bitter person. No, he became the person through accumulation. I've talked about the law of compounding on this channel. Please, if you've not seen it, go watch it. One stressful week at a time, one unprocessed hurt, unprocessed wound at a time, one unmet need at a time. And then one day, someone you loved said something small but devastating. They said, "You are usually and always upset these days." That sentence shook him because he never realized, he never knew. But that day, he realized that he had been defending his stress for so long, he never noticed that it has started becoming his personality. Stress has become his personality. A lot of people need to hear that. Just because something happened to you repeatedly does not mean it gets to become your identity permanently. No, it shouldn't be. Life requires adaptation. That is real. Thank you so much, Jack, for the flowers. You get older, responsibilities increase, pressure changes you. You become a parent. I'm a parent. Or I've been a parent for the past 10 plus years. Now my kids are no longer babies. They're no longer toddlers. They're now moving. They're now growing. So I needed to change. Those are the pressures that comes with life. You get older. Responsibilities increase. Pressures changes you. Experience changes you. Parenthood changes you. Leadership changes you. Pain also changes you, my friends. So I'm not saying change is bad. No, far from that. I'm asking, did adaptation help you mature? Were you able to adapt during these changes? Or did it slowly disconnect you from your best self? Friends, there is a difference between becoming wiser and becoming colder. There is a difference between becoming more discerning and becoming more cynical. There is a difference between becoming disciplined and becoming emotionally unavailable. Some people think this is just who I am now. I get that a lot on this channel. Some people at the end of the videos, I get those comments. Someone say, "Hey, Matt, this is just me. You don't know everything about me." I said, "See, I don't need to know everything about you. I also go through all my stuff too. But I don't allow that become me. I don't allow what I go through become my identity." Some people think, "Oh, this is just me now. You don't know me, Matt. This is for those guys, the good guys." No. But sometimes it's not just who you are. It is who you became to cope. Who you've trained your mind to cope. So for you, that is now okay. And see, coping, trying to form yourself into those identities can last a very long time if nobody interrupts them. It's like a circle. It stays there. You're becoming mean, you're becoming mean, you're growing mean, you're growing mean. And since it's a circle, unless you know and interrupt the circle, it will stay for a very long time. And the worst thing, the bad thing about this is that it doesn't make any noise. So you will not even know that you've changed until somebody have to tell you from the outside that, hey, this is not you anymore. That is why this talk is very important. This talk is titled "The Person I Was Becoming." The person I was becoming. Then something happened. See, there was a woman who used to talk about life with spark. Whenever she talks, you feel the life in her words. She had ideas, she had vision, she had ambition, she had things she wanted to build. But over the years, life became very practical. Like somebody told me the other day, "Hey, Matt, be practical." I said, "Yes, I'm practical." She had children. She had work to go to. She had schedules to meet. She has responsibility. She had fatigue, needs, noise in her ears. And she kept telling herself, "I'll come back to me later." I did a video yesterday where I talked about the role and the person. Matt is a dad. But that role as a dad is different from Matt as a person. If I keep on ignoring Matt as a person and focusing on being Matt as a dad, I might be a good dad, but a frustrated person. I might be a great dad to my kids, a loving husband to my wife, but I'll be a person that is going down the drain. That is what this woman was going through. Because of life, because of being practical, because of things that happens to us, to everybody, responsibility, kids, they started growing up, work, schedules, everything, needs. You tell yourself, "Hold on, lad, let me face these things." That's what she did. That sentence, it sounds very harmless, I'll come back to myself. I'll come back to my dreams. I'll come back to becoming this person. I'll come back to the goals I've set up the things I've set up to implement. That sentence is so harmless. It looks reasonable. It sounds reasonable, but it can become a graveyard. It can become a cemetery of dreams, cemetery of your personality. I'll come back to me later. I'll come back to my dreams later. I'll come back to my joy later. I'll come back to creativity later. I'll come back to health later. And after many years, she noticed something painful. She was no longer even reaching for more. This woman that used to have sparks in her words, life, vision, everything, she was no longer reaching for more. She had settled. She had settled into the role. That is what a lot of adults go through in this life. A lot of people, they never get to become who they are becoming, not because they lack talent. No, life happened. Life happened. They got practical. They got kids, they got work, they got things to do. So in that instance of getting things to do, of being practical, they keep themselves in the corner and play the role and forget the person. This lady was no longer reaching for more. Not because more was impossible. She was a great woman with ideas and vision. But she has slowly trained herself not to expect anything beyond maintenance. That's one of the saddest things life can do to a person. Life will not break you loudly. No, life doesn't break you loudly. You are not a horse that needs to be broken. Life doesn't do that. Life reduces you quietly until survival feels like the only reasonable goal. You now tell yourself, I'm just living day to day. Mad, that's all that matters now. I live day to day. And when a person stops reaching, they often start calling resignation maturity. They often start saying, I'm now old, I'm now matured. They often start saying their risk appetite reduces. But resignation is not peace. No, no, no. Resignation is not peace. And shrinking is not wisdom. Shrinking is not wisdom. So let's talk about rooms here. I've done a full video on this, but this is just a piece. The room you stay in long enough will shape you. The room full of complaint. The room full of mediocrity. The room where growth is mocked. The room where discipline is rare. The room where vision sounds strange. The room where healing is uncomfortable. The room where nobody asks better questions. The room you stay in long enough will shape you. Whether you know or not, whether you believe or not, whether you like it or not. Environment does not just influence your mood. It influences your standard. And standard shapes identity. I want that to sink. See, if everyone around you avoids hard things, you start calling avoidance normal. For you, avoidance becomes normalcy. If everyone around you lives reactively, intention starts to feel like an extreme. You start seeing people, you start shaming ambition. If everyone around you speak in small terms, big thinking starts to feel like ignorant or arrogant. Oh, this guy is so arrogant. What makes you feel you can talk like that? Are you better than every other person? It is the room you've been in. It's the room you've been living. Your environment has conditioned your thinking. See, if everyone around you numbs instead of heal, real self-confrontation, talking to yourself, start to feel strange. They see you as being mad. Saying, I need me time. They're like, what is me time, Matt? This is why some people do not need more motivation. I say that on this channel every now and then. A lot of people do not need more motivation. They just need a different room. They need a different environment. And I did a video on environment. Please go watch it. It's not about changing your address. And your environment is not only your physical address. That is just one of them. And it's not even the toughest one. Please subscribe and go watch it. People do not need motivation. They do not need more information. What they need is a different room. Because there are versions of you that will never fully emerge in the environment that trained your smallness. If your environment has trained you to be small, that environment will not allow growth. It will not allow growth because that environment is conditioned. And whoever is within that confines, even in their mind, even the digital environment from their phones, they will not grow. I knew someone who changed depending on who they were around. Not in a manipulative way, in a survival way. With one group, they hide their ambition. It's like a chameleon. You know chameleon? Chameleon around any color, it adapts to that color. So with another group, they hide their pain. With another group, they hide their intellect. With another group, they hide their standard. And after years of cherry picking and shape shifting and color changing, they got exhausted. Not just socially, but spiritually and depth. Because when you spend enough time becoming digestible for every room, you eventually forget what your unedited self sounds like. You forget. That is identity erosion. And a lot of people are suffering from that. A lot of people are suffering from that. Not because they lack personality, but because they've trained themselves to fragment in order to stay accepted. They train their minds. Oh, Matt, if I get into this room, they say when you get to Rome, behave like Romans. And I say, no, what makes you want to behave like Romans? Why can't you be you? So tonight, I want to ask you something hard. If you're just meeting me for the first time, welcome. This is Build for More with Matt Miller. Kindly hit the subscribe button so that you hear more of this. I want to ask you something hard. How much of you, or let me put it this way, how much of who you are right now is actually you? And how much of who you are right now is adapted for rooms that are never healthy for you? That question can change your mind if you closely look at it. Sometimes the person you're becoming is the person stress was building in silence. Stress can make you more defensive, more impatient, more self-protective, more controlling, more easily overwhelmed, more likely to retreat emotionally. And if stress becomes chronic enough for you, you stop seeing things as symptoms. You start calling them your personality. You start saying, this is who I am. Friends, I talk to a lot of people on this channel. And some of them say, hey, Matt, I'm just like that. I'm just built like that. Some say, Matt, this is just me, man. I can't change. Some say, I don't have the patience for nonsense anymore. I'm not emotional. I keep to myself these days. I don't trust people. Things like that. And I always say, maybe it's possible. But maybe some of these traits are not your essence. Maybe they are what prolonged pressure built in you while you were trying not to fall apart. Maybe. Friends, it matters what was built in you. Now, the reason why I say these things, what was built in you by pressure can be rebuilt. But the first thing you need to be aware, that is why these calls make sense. That is why these sessions I do on YouTube make sense. You need to be aware. You need to be honest with yourself and tell yourself the truth. There was a son who grew up watching emotional distance. He told himself very clearly, when I grow up, I will never be like that. He watched his father. Sometimes it's on the dinner table, but his mind is in a different address. It's in the working place. This son said, when I grow up, I'm going to be warm. I'm going to be present for my family. I'm going to be available. I'm going to be different. I'm never going to be like my dad. I'm never going to be emotionally distant. But years later, with practicality, that's what I'll call it, with stress, with work, with children, with bills, with unhealed wounds, and a life that moved too fast, he noticed something very disturbing. He had become emotionally distant too. What? Not because he wanted to be. He has always said, I don't want to be. But because old patterns are easy to repeat when life gets heavy and self-awareness gets light. He became quieter. He became more withdrawn. He became less expressive. He became less patient. He became harder to know. And then one day he saw the same confusion in his child's eyes. that he used to feel in his own. That kind of realization can break a person open, can tear you from the crown of your head to the sole of your feet. Because it is one thing to suffer from a pattern. It's another thing to realize the pattern is now moving through you. And it's not stopping now. But that is where transformation begins, though. When you stop saying, this is just who I am, and start saying, this is what I learned, and I can interrupt it. I won't let this cycle continue. I won't let it continue. Friends, identity is not announced, it's accumulated. I want to slow this down a little because it is central to this talk. Identity is not usually announced. It's accumulated. You become the person who scrolls instead of starting. The person who postpones instead of confronting, you postpone it till tomorrow. You become the person who avoids instead of speaking. You become the person who assumes instead of asking. You become the person who reacts instead of reflecting. And you become the person who gives up too quickly. The person who numbs often, who settles. The person who survives but does not build. Or you become the person who learns. The person who heals. The person who returns. The person who says hard things gently. The person who moves before they feel fully ready. The person who pays attention. Both of them are forms of becoming. Both of these are forms of becoming. So the question is not, am I becoming someone? Of course you are. You might be becoming to the right or to the left. You might be becoming to the south or to the north. The question is, who is repeating, or what is reputation turning me into? What pattern am I taking? Am I absorbing? Am I accumulating that is turning me into something else? Who am I becoming from reputation? Some people have accepted depletion as identity. There was a person who said all the time, this is just adulthood. This is just, they see, as an adult, you're just tired every time, man. You're just tired. Yes, adulthood is demanding. But what they've done was something deeper. They have normalized emotional neglect, physical neglect, spiritual neglect, mental overcrowding. They were always tired, always behind, always trying to recover, always trying to play catch up, always consuming things that never replenish them. And slowly, they became less joyful, less sharp, less present, less hopeful. Then they started narrating the decline as maturity. No one feels alive all the time, they said. This is just life, you know. You just get older and you get harder. No, friends, no. 1,000 times no. Some of that is aging, and that is okay. Some of that is pressure, but some of that is what repeated self-neglect has been building in you. That is hard to hear, but it is freeing too. Because if self-neglect shaped this version of you, then care, then discipline and renewal can help shape the next version of you. One of the clearest ways to see who you're becoming is to look at how you now love. How patient are you? How available are you? How quickly do you become irritated? How well do you listen? How often are you half present? How often do you shut down? How often do you reach for your phone instead of a person's face? See, relationship exposes identity, not image. It exposes identity. Because when people are close enough to us, they experience the version of us that pressure reveals. And sometimes the people closest to you are silently grieving the person you used to be. Friends, that's painful. That is painful. A partner might be grieving your softness. A child might be grieving your attention. A friend might be grieving your openness. Even you might be grieving your own former aliveness. So when I say the person I was becoming, I'm not just talking about private feelings. I'm talking about the version of you that other people now have to live with too. There was a couple who loved each other very well. Nothing dramatic destroyed them. No explosion, no headline crisis, no big public collapse. What changed was more subtle. Life got busy, children came, schedules got filled up, stress increased, conversation narrowed. They became very efficient parents and partners, good managers, functioning adults, but they were slowly becoming strangers to themselves. They talked about logistics more than life. They talked about problem more than dreams. They talk about schedules more than feeling. They talk more than tenderness. And one day, one of them said something heartbreaking. I miss who we were and who we were becoming before life just became all about management. That line matters. Because couples are not just in a relationship, they are becoming a relationship. And if you do not pay attention, you can slowly become a colder marriage. You can become a quieter home, a more distant love, without ever deciding to be that. That is why awareness is so important, my friends, because the person you're becoming changes the atmosphere everyone around you lives inside. Disappointment also shapes people too. Repeated disappointment can make you guarded. Repeated delay can make you cynical. Repeated betrayal can make you suspicious. Repeated silence can make you stop asking. Repeated failure can make you avoid trying. And after enough disappointment, a person starts to carry an invisible script. They say things like, don't expect too much, don't hope too much, don't trust too much, don't open too much, don't try too hard. That script, it feels protective, but it can slowly build a version of you that is harder to inspire, that is harder to reach, that is harder to move. Sometimes the person you're becoming is simply the person disappointment taught you to be. And again, that is not about blame, it's about recognition. Because once you recognize it, my friends, once you recognize it, you start grieving honestly and rebuilding intentionally. A person once said, I do not realize how much I've drifted until I hit 50. Not because 50 is old, but because 50 gave perspective. They looked at their routines, their relationship, their health, their inner life, their unfinished callings, and they realized for years they have been functioning on autopilot. They're not dead, not collapsed, not irresponsible. They were just absent from the deeper work of becoming. They have been paying bills, they have been showing up, doing what was needed. But they had not been asking, is this shaping me into the person I respect? Is this shaping me into the person my children need? Is this shaping me into the person I can live with peacefully? That kind of realization can feel painful, but it is also powerful. Because awareness at 50 is better than blindness at 60. Of course, yes. Awareness at 60 is better than blindness at 70. Awareness today is better than blindness tomorrow, my friends. There is still power in seeing clearly while life is still in your hands. Now let's turn the episode. Let's turn it upside down. Because the goal is not to leave you, it's not to leave you crushed at all. The goal is not to leave you sad. The goal is to break the spell. The goal is to interrupt that cycle. The spell of autopilot, the spell of saying, this is just who I am now, Matt. This is the spell of saying people never really change. The spell of this is probably as good as it gets. No, no, no. 1,000 times no. Awareness is disruptive. Awareness says things like, I see what my habits are doing. I see what this room is doing to me. I see what my silence is doing. I see what my fear is doing. I see what my numbness is doing. I see who I am becoming if I keep walking this direction. And once you really see it, you cannot unsee it. That is where change begins. Not with the hype, with honesty. So how do you rebuild? Not with one giant performance. Not with trying to become a brand new human tomorrow. No. You rebuild by changing the repetition. You read a little more. You scroll a little less. You pause before you respond. You think before you answer. You speak the truth sooner. You move your body. You protect your surroundings. You sit in silence. You ask better questions. You return to what once used to come alive. You apologize when needed. You set standards. Leave smaller rooms without guilt. Spend time with people who call you higher. Spend time with Matt. Spend time with this channel. Practice better habits. Every small action is a vote, but it's a vote for the next version of you. Use your ballot wisely. Use it wisely. I want you to internalize this in your mind. Just do it like, oh, I choose who I become. I want you to internalize that. I choose who I become. Not casually, but let it sound good to you. I choose who I become. I choose who I become when I'm tired. I choose who I become when I'm pressured. I choose who I become when old patterns call. I choose who I become when drift becomes easier. I choose who I become when the room expects the smaller version of me. Because awareness without decision becomes another emotional moment. Friends, we've been talking for some days. Episode 1 on this series was titled The Game Changed. Then episode 2 was The Cost of Waiting. Episode 3 was The Comfort is Quietly Expensive. 4, he said it was I Thought I Had Time. 5 was The Years I Gave Away. 6 was The Life I Almost Missed. And 7 is The Person I Was Becoming. Tonight may be the deepest truth in this. You may not love the person life has quietly shaped you into, but you caught it. You got the picture. You noticed it. You named it. And that matters. Because the person you're becoming is not the person you're forced to remain. You're still becoming right now, even in this moment. So, become carefully. Become honestly. Become intentionally. Become in a way that your future will thank you for before it's too late. Before it's too late. If this message spoke to you, like it, share it, hit the subscribe button, please. And talk to somebody about it. Share it to somebody. Tomorrow we are doing the next episode, and the next episode is titled The Day I Stopped Drifting. Whoa, that's going to be crazy. This is Matt Miller signing out for now. Catch you tomorrow. Peace out.